So, what's all the hype about staining burnt wood anyways? Well, building something with stained burnt wood, or otherwise known as Shou Sugi Ban, will leave you with a beautifully contrasted work of art that'll be an attractive conversation piece. I'm going to show you a handful of different Shou Sugi Ban techniques that'll level up your woodworking. And once you see how easy it is and how beautiful it looks, you'll definitely want to use this technique to build some attractive looking projects. Now the good thing is you don't need many materials to do this, but the materials you will need are a soft wood like pine with a good grain pattern, a torch, a wire brush or nylon wheel brush, some stain, some wipe on or brush on poly, some foam brushes, clean rags, a pair of gloves, and a dust mask. So the first process that I want to show you is just going to be a light burn. It's not enough to char the wood, but will give it that zebra-like effect contrast. And when you're doing this, try to find a grain pattern that you'd like here. So I usually look at whichever side I think would be the coolest grain pattern and go with that. Now, when you do this, obviously you're not going to want to torch this piece of wood here on a flammable surface. So what I've done is, for the sake of this video, I've just put some screws here and I'm going to stick it in the vise so that the vise can hold in the piece of wood. We're just going to char it right here on the vise. Now, when you do this, what you're going to want to do is actually hold the torch kind of farther away. You don't want to just go all the way up to it and just char the hell out of the wood, because then you're not going to get that nice, even burnt effect on here. So let me show you. So what I usually do is start off by sneaking up on the wood with the torch to determine the distance and speed that I want to go with. The reason I do this is so that I don't burn the wood too dark and maintain that consistent pattern. It's probably best that you try this on a scrap piece of wood first, just to get a little feel for it. And always remember to keep the torch moving at a consistent speed and distance from the wood, because if you slow down your pace, you'll end up creating dark spots, which isn't the end of the world, but you won't get a consistent burn pattern. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and burn these last two here. Probably take me a couple minutes, but for you, about 2 seconds, because it's YouTube. So now comes the satisfying part, putting on the stain. And I find that the more vibrant colors that you use, the better your results are, because it seems to give more of a contrast, because those bright colors are going to pop out against the dark grain. I usually find that putting a couple coats on seems to do the job, and the more coats you put on, the deeper and richer the color will look on the wood. Now throughout the staining process here, you'll notice that I'm using rags, which can be used, but I would recommend using foam brushes. Using a foam brush will lay down the stain more evenly and consistently, and is less messy. Now the next couple of processes I'm going to show you takes it a step further and is personally one of my go-to favorites. I like it because it gives the wood grain more texture, pretty much to the point where you can run your hands across the board and feel the grain. Now we're going to use two different style brushes here so that you can see the different effect that they give, so that you know which brush that you'll want to use. Alright, so now when we're going to be burning this piece of wood, we're not going to do light even passes. We're actually going to burn this baby black. Obviously keep the torch moving, don't just leave it in one spot. No need to make, like I said, light even passes. Let me show you what I mean here. So with this process, again, we're not doing light even passes, which makes it a little bit easier than the last process. We're going to slow down the speed and burn the wood till it's black, but again, we're still keeping the torch moving at a consistent pace. The nice part about this process is, even if you slow down too much and burn the wood a little bit more in one spot, it's not going to really affect the outcome after being wire brushed. Now, the reason we're burning the wood more here is because we're going to be wire brushing it. When you burn the wood, it makes it easier to remove the soft grain, thus creating more texture, and will leave the harder grain burnt, creating that nice contrast. Okay, so now we're going to scrape the grain, and the easiest way to do this is with a drill brush. So I got this from my local big box store. I think I paid around $5 for it, and it is the medium to fine grit. So I did try the coarse grit. It ripped up the grain a little bit too much. So we're going to go with this medium grit, and as always, dust mask, safety glasses are your best friend here. Unless you're looking for a workout, I recommend getting yourself a nylon drill brush. It makes this process so much easier and quicker than using a wire hand brush, which you'll see me struggle with in the next few minutes. And believe it or not, it's weirdly satisfying using this thing. Just a forewarning though, you may want to do this outside because the soot gets everywhere. If you're doing multiple boards, you will be covered in soot. And again, I find that using vibrant colors is going to give you more contrast and pop against that dark grain. Now, it definitely helps to have a foam brush with this process because of the texture of the wood. It's easier and quicker to soak the stain up with the foam brush rather than trying to do it with a rag. So now you get to watch this guy put in some elbow grease with the hand wire brush. Again, it's much easier to do this with the drill brush, but if you want to hand scrape a dozen boards, then more power to you. If you decide to take the less traveled road and go this route, just make sure that you're always scraping in the direction of the grain. And Godspeed. So the last process that I'm going to show you is going to give the wood a really unique finish. It involves charring the wood like we did in the last step, but the only difference here is we're not going to do any brushing. We're just going to poly right over that charred wood and see what happens. Okay, so this last piece, we are really going to char it. We're going to hold it on there a little bit longer, and it's going to give it this alligator skin-like effect. You'll see what I mean here. So this burning process is basically like the last burning process that you just saw, except we're moving the torch even slower, and we'll be charring the wood until you see an alligator skin-like effect. And it's pretty hard to screw this process up since you don't have to worry too much about moving the torch at an even, consistent pace. However, you do want to make sure that you keep moving the torch at all times. Alright, so as you can see, if you look at the skin of the board here, it looks like alligator skin. I chose to use spray-on poly this time because, well, I ran out of brush-on poly for one, and number two, I put on a couple of coats that I didn't want to wait 3 hours between coats. You'll notice once you put the poly down, you'll really start to see that color pop even more. And if you're building something, it's always nice to have that little layer of protection. Now you'll notice that some of these Shou Sugi Ban techniques kind of give that wood a weathered and aged effect. Now if you want the ultimate tutorial on how to age and weather wood, check out this video here.